The scent of freshly brewed coffee wafted through the air, a stark contrast to the chaos swirling in my head. 2 weeks to go until my wedding day, and everything was unraveling faster than a poorly wrapped gift. My name is Alex, and this is the story of how everything went horribly, hilariously, wrong. It all started with the guest list. My fiancée, Jennifer, and I had agreed on a modest gathering of close friends and family. But last night, her Aunt Clara had called to inform us that she'd taken the liberty of inviting the entire bridge club, all 32 members. "They're like family," she'd said cheerily, completely oblivious to my stunned silence. I hung up the phone, turned to Jennifer, and uttered the words no groom should ever say. "We need to talk about your family." Jennifer's eyes narrowed. "What about my family?" Aunt Clara invited her bridge club. "That's 32 extra mouths to feed." "Oh, come on, Alex," she said with a dismissive wave. "It's just a few more people." "A few? Jennifer, our venue barely fits the original list. We're already pushing the fire code limits." The argument escalated until she stormed off to bed, leaving me on the couch with a half-empty glass of whiskey and a head full of doubts. Was this a sign? Were we doomed before we even started? The next morning, I decided to take control. I began with the caterer, hoping to add extra meals. "Oh, we'd love to help, Mr. Parker," the caterer said, "but the menu is already set. Any changes now would be impossible." Strike one. Next, I called the venue. "We can't accommodate more guests," the manager said firmly. "If you exceed the capacity, we'll have to cancel the event." Strike two. Desperate, I turned to my best man, Jared, for advice. Jared was my go-to guy, the one person who could always find a silver lining. He listened patiently as I vented, then leaned back with a mischievous grin. "We've got two options," he said. "One, you tell Aunt Clara she and her bridge club are uninvited. Or two, we move the wedding to a bigger venue." "We've already paid for the venue," I groaned. "And uninviting people would be awkward." "Then you need a miracle," Jared said, patting me on the back. "And lucky for you, I know a guy." Jared's guy turned out to be a shady event planner named Vince, who operated out of a tiny office in the back of a bowling alley. Vince had slick back hair, a gold tooth, and the kind of confidence that made you question your own decisions. "You've got a problem, and I've got solutions," Vince said, spreading his arms wide. "But it'll cost you." "How much?" I asked warily. "Let's just say you'll be eating ramen for a while." I reluctantly handed over a deposit, and Vince assured me he'd handle everything. I wasn't convinced, but I was out of options. Meanwhile, Jennifer and I were barely speaking. The stress of the wedding, and the bridge club debacle, had driven a wedge between us. Every conversation felt like a minefield, and I was tiptoeing through it, trying not to set off any explosions. Then came the dress disaster. Jennifer's wedding dress, a stunning vintage piece that had been in her family for generations, was supposed to be at the tailor for final alterations. But when she went to pick it up, the tailor's shop was closed, permanently. A "for lease" sign hung in the window, and the dress was nowhere to be found. Jennifer called me in tears. "My dress is gone, Alex. What am I supposed to do?" I didn't have an answer. Instead, I drove to the shop, pounded on the door, and left voicemails for the tailor. But it was no use. The dress was gone, and so was any hope of a perfect wedding. As the days passed, things only got worse. Vince's miracle turned out to be a circus tent in a field 20 miles outside of town. The band cancelled because their lead singer came down with laryngitis. And to top it all off, Aunt Clara's bridge club started making requests for the menu, insisting on gluten-free, vegan, and keto options. I was at my breaking point. One night, Jared found me sitting on the floor of my apartment, surrounded by empty takeout containers and a pile of crumpled wedding plans. "You look like hell," he said. "Thanks," I muttered. "I feel like it." Jared sat down next to me. "You're doing all this because you love Jennifer, right?" "Of course." "Then stop trying to make everything perfect," he said. "It's not about the venue or the guest list or the dress. It's about you and Jennifer starting your life together." His words hit me like a ton of bricks. I'd been so focused on the details that I'd lost sight of what really mattered. The next day, I called Jennifer. "Can we talk?" She hesitated. "Okay." We met at our favorite coffee shop. The one where we'd had our first date. Over cups of cappuccino, I poured my heart out. "I'm sorry for everything. I've been so caught up in trying to fix things that I forgot why we're doing this in the first place." Tears welled up in her eyes. "I'm sorry too. I've been so stressed that I've taken it out on you." I reached across the table and took her hand in mine. "Jennifer, no matter what happens, I want you to know that I love you more than anything. Even if we get married in a barn with paper plates, as long as I'm with you, it'll be perfect." She smiled through her tears. "I love you too, Alex. And you're right. It's not about the wedding. It's about us." We sat there for hours, talking, laughing, and rediscovering the connection that had brought us together. By the time we left, we had a new plan: strip the wedding down to its essentials. No circus tent, no fancy catering, no overblown guest list. Just us, our closest loved ones, and a simple ceremony in the park where we'd first said, "I love you." The next 2 weeks were a whirlwind of last-minute arrangements, but this time, it felt right. Jennifer found a beautiful off-the-rack dress that suited her perfectly. Jared called in a favor and got his cousin's jazz trio to play at the reception. And Aunt Clara's bridge club. They graciously declined the invitation when they learned there wouldn't be a buffet. On the morning of the wedding, as I stood under a canopy of blooming cherry blossoms, watching Jennifer walk down the aisle, my breath caught in my throat. She was radiant, her eyes sparkling with the promise of forever. Each step she took felt like a heartbeat, drawing us closer together. When she reached me, she whispered, "You're my everything." I couldn't help but smile. "And you're mine." The chaos, the stress, the disasters, none of it mattered anymore. What mattered was us, standing together, ready to face whatever life threw our way. In the end, our wedding wasn't perfect. But it was perfect for us. And as we danced under the stars to the sound of a jazz saxophone, I realized that sometimes the best stories come from the most unexpected twists, and the greatest romance lies in the journey, not the destination.